Chapter 1. The sentence that changed everything. My husband said, "It's my money." And the room went silent. That it wasn't the kind of silence you get when someone drops a glass or forgets a name. It was the heavy kind. The kind that makes forks hover in midair. The kind that makes people suddenly very interested in their napkins. That we were sitting around my in-laws' massive oak dining table, the one his mother polished before every holiday like it was a sacred altar. It was our annual late summer family gathering. The cousins were outside by the pool. The men had been arguing about college football 10 minutes earlier. My sister-in-law had just refilled everyone's wine, and then my husband decided to say that, "It's my money. Not ours, not we, mine." That I felt the words hit my chest before I fully processed them. That I laughed at first. That I actually laughed, because surely he didn't mean it the way it sounded, but he did. That he leaned back in his chair, one arm draped over it like he was delivering the final line of a courtroom drama. His tone wasn't joking. It wasn't playful. It was declarative. Possessive. "It's my money. I worked for it." The silence thickened. His father cleared his throat but didn't say anything. His mother stared down at her plate. My daughter, our 14-year-old, looked at me with wide, confused eyes, and in that moment, something inside me shifted, because this wasn't about money, this was about erasure. We had been married for 17 years. 17. That I met him when I was 23. He was ambitious, driven, charming in that quiet, steady way that made you feel safe. Back then, he talked about building a life together. About partnership. About our future. And for a long time, I believed that's what we had. When he started his consulting firm, I was the one who stayed up with him at 2 a.m. formatting proposals. I was the one who edited contracts, answered early client emails, built spreadsheets when he didn't know how. I had a marketing degree. I knew how to structure pitch decks before pitch decks were trendy, but when our second child was born and his company finally started making real money, we decided, together, that I would step back, just for a few years. He said, "You've done so much already," he said, "we're a team." I left my job. That I raised our children. That I managed our home. That I handled school meetings, doctor appointments, soccer schedules, birthday parties, grocery budgets, broken dishwashers, and elderly parents. That I made sure he could focus on growing his company without worrying about whether we had toilet paper or health insurance paperwork filed correctly, and I never once considered that what I was doing didn't count. Until that night, the conversation had started innocently. My father-in-law had asked about a recent investment property we'd purchased, a small rental duplex across town. That I answered before my husband could, "We're hoping to renovate by October and list it before the holidays." I said we, because that's how I saw it. That he corrected me, "Well, technically, I bought it," he said with a chuckle. That I smiled tightly. "We bought it." He shook his head, still smiling, but there was something sharp behind it. "I mean, let's be real. It's my money. I worked for it." And there it was, that sentence, delivered casually. Publicly, like a fact everyone should accept. I felt heat crawl up my neck. 17 years. 2 pregnancies. 3 miscarriages. He barely took time off. 4 hundreds of unpaid hours helping him build that company in the beginning. And now, it was his money. Across the table, my daughter's fork clinked against her plate. She looked from him to me. Kids understand more than we think. And I realized something terrifying. That if I stayed quiet, I would be teaching her that silence is the appropriate response to being diminished. That night wasn't just about my pride. That it was about precedent. "Your money?" I repeated calmly. That he nodded, "Yes. Mine." He didn't look at me when he said it. He looked at his father, seeking approval. His father gave a small nod, and that's when I understood, this wasn't spontaneous, this was generational. His mother had never worked outside the home. She asked permission before spending anything over $100. She thanked her husband for letting her redecorate the kitchen once in 1998. That I used to feel sorry for her. Now I saw the blueprint. And I saw what my husband expected from me: gratitude, compliance, silence. I set my wine glass down carefully. That I made sure my voice didn't shake. "You're right," I said. That he blinked. That he wasn't expecting agreement. "It is your money." My mother-in-law finally looked up. That my husband smirked slightly, victorious, and then I added, "And my unpaid labor built the foundation that allowed you to earn it." The smirk vanished. The room stayed silent. But the silence had changed. That it wasn't heavy anymore. That it was charged. He laughed awkwardly. "Come on. That's dramatic." "Is it?" I asked. "You chose to stay home. We both knew that wasn't entirely true that we chose, together, but revisionist history is convenient when it benefits only one person. I chose to support our family, I said evenly, and I still do. He shifted in his chair. Let's not turn this into something it's not. But it already was something that it was exposure. After dinner, people avoided eye contact with me, not because I was wrong, but because I had disrupted the comfort. Women are expected to absorb statements like that quietly. To smooth them over. To preserve the mood that I didn't yell, that I didn't cry, that I simply refused to pretend, and that unsettled everyone, especially him. On the drive home, the tension was suffocating. The kids had their headphones in. That he kept both hands on the wheel. You embarrassed me, he finally said. That I stared out the window at passing streetlights. You diminished me. He scoffed. You're overreacting. No, I wasn't. For the first time in years, I was reacting appropriately. When we got home, I didn't argue, that I didn't slam doors, that I didn't cry in the bathroom like I might have 10 years earlier. Instead, I did something else. That I went into our home office, that I opened the filing cabinet, and I started reading tax returns, property deeds, investment accounts, business registrations, loan documents. Everything, because if it was his money, I needed to know exactly how much of it existed, and whose name was actually on what. By midnight, my hands were trembling, not from fear, from clarity. There were accounts I didn't recognize, transfers I had never been told about. A business holding company registered under a variation of his name, and one detail that made my stomach drop: the new duplex property. It wasn't in both our names. That it was solely in his. That I sat back in the chair. The house was silent. That my husband was asleep upstairs, peaceful, confident, certain, and for the first time in 17 years, I realized something chilling. He hadn't just said, "It's my money." He had been preparing to mean it. I closed the folder slowly. That I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is loud. This was quieter, colder, strategic, because if he wanted to draw a line between his and mine, then I needed to understand exactly where that line was, and what side of it I was standing on. That night, I didn't confront him. That I didn't wake him up. That I didn't cry. That I opened my laptop instead. And I searched for one thing: the best family attorney in our county, because the silence at that dinner table, it wasn't the end of the conversation. That it was the beginning of something much bigger, and this time, I wasn't going to stay quiet. Chapter 2, the consultation. That I didn't sleep that night, not because I was heartbroken, but because I was calculating. By 6 in the morning, I had printed copies of every document I'd found. Tax returns from the past 5 years. Property records. Business filings. Screenshots of account summaries. That I made breakfast like I always did: egg whites for him, toast for the kids, coffee strong enough to wake the dead. That he acted normal. That almost impressed me. That he kissed my cheek, told me he had a long day, asked if I could transfer money to cover the landscaper. Transfer money from our joint checking account. The irony nearly made me smile. Sure, I said, calm, pleasant, cooperative. 17 years of performance had prepared me for this role. At 10:30 a.m., I sat in a quiet office across from a woman named Patricia Myers, gray blazer, no-nonsense eyes, mid-50s. The kind of attorney who didn't waste time pretending to be warm. You said on the phone this is exploratory, she began. It is, I replied. That was technically true. That I wasn't filing for divorce, not yet. That I was gathering information. She reviewed the document silently for several minutes, her eyebrows lifted once, then again. Did you know about this holding company? She asked. No. She turned the papers toward me. There it was. Clear as day. An LLC registered 2 years ago, managing, consulting assets. Sole owner, my husband. My stomach tightened. He told me the business profits flowed directly into our joint account. She gave me a look I now recognize as professional restraint. They don't. Over the next hour, Patricia explained things slowly. Methodically, money had been diverted. Legally? Yes, ethically. That was murkier. In this state, she said, marital income is typically considered shared property, even if deposited elsewhere. Typically, the word echoed, but? I asked. But the longer this structure exists without objection, the more complicated it becomes. Translation: silence favors the person controlling the information, and I had been silent, because I trusted him. Are you planning to leave? She asked directly. That I hesitated. I'm planning to understand my position. She nodded. Smart answer. Then she said something that shifted everything. If he's restructuring assets quietly, it's usually because he's planning for something. The word something hung between us: divorce, protection, separation, exit strategy. Had the dinner comment been arrogance? Or a warning? I drove home in a fog. 17 years replayed differently in my head now, the sudden insistence on handling finances alone 5 years ago, the separate credit card for business convenience. The way he discouraged me from logging into certain accounts because it's complicated. Complicated. No strategic, and I had mistaken it for competence. When I walked into the house, it felt unfamiliar, like I was seeing it through legal documents instead of memories. The kitchen island where we'd celebrated birthdays, the living room where we'd built blanket forts, the office where I had once helped him draft his first contract. All of it partially funded by decisions I hadn't been informed about. That I went back to the filing cabinet. This time, I photographed everything that if he was building a wall, I needed copies of every brick. That evening, he came home cheerful, too cheerful. You're quiet, he observed during dinner, just tired. He studied me for a second. Was he suspicious? Or was he so certain of his control that the idea never crossed his mind? After the kids went upstairs, he poured himself bourbon. I've been thinking, he said. About what? Our finances. My pulse slowed, not sped up, slowed. When the new project closes, I might move some things around. For tax efficiency. Move some things, more things, without asking, without informing, without including. That I nodded lightly, okay. He seemed satisfied with that response, and in that moment, I realized something critical. That he expected obedience, not partnership. Later that night, I logged into our joint account, then I opened a new browser window, and I opened something else. That a checking account. That I and my name only. That I didn't transfer anything, not yet, but the account existed. That mattered. Because independence doesn't begin with confrontation. That it begins with preparation. 2 days later, Patricia called. I did some preliminary digging. She said there are 3 additional investment accounts tied to his social security number. 3 combined value? I asked. Just over $640,000. My breath caught, but I didn't let it show in my voice, and none of it is in a joint structure. The silence this time wasn't heavy. That it was clarifying. That night, I watched him differently, the way he scrolled through his phone, the way he angled the screen away from me, the way he confidently discussed our future plans with the kids. That he wasn't planning our future. That he was protecting his version of it, and I was no longer naive enough to believe those were the same thing. The breaking point didn't come from anger. That it came from a simple realization. If I did nothing, I would wake up one day legally cornered, financially dependent, emotionally blindsided, and explaining to my daughter why I hadn't prepared. That would never happen. The following week, Patricia sent me a checklist. Document everything. Do not confront prematurely, avoid alerting him, track large transfers, secure copies outside the home. The strategy was clear. This wasn't about revenge. It was about leverage. One Friday afternoon, while he was at work, I accessed the county property records online. The duplex wasn't the only asset solely in his name. There was a small commercial office space, purchased 18 months ago. That I stared at the screen. That he had told me business was steady but conservative. Conservative didn't buy commercial property in cash. That I leaned back slowly, the sentence at the family dinner replayed in my head. It's my money. Noted it was marital income redirected through strategic silence, and he assumed I would never question it. That night, as he slept beside me, steady and unaware, I felt something unexpected. Not heartbreak, not rage, resolve. That if he was preparing for separation, then so was I. But I would not move impulsively. That I would not react emotionally. That I would gather. That I would secure. That I would understand every dollar, every document, every liability. And when the time came, the room wouldn't go silent because of his words. That it would go silent because of mine. Chapter 3. The first move. The first transfer I made was small enough not to trigger alerts, small enough not to raise suspicion. $500 from our joint checking account into the account I had opened in my name. That I did it on a Tuesday morning while sitting at the kitchen island, sunlight spilling across the granite like nothing in the world had changed. That my hand didn't shake. That surprised me. That I wasn't stealing. That I wasn't hiding. That I was reallocating access to money that legally belonged to both of us. Still, it felt like crossing an invisible line, not because it was wrong, but because it meant I had accepted something. The marriage, as I understood it, no longer existed. By the end of the week, I had moved $3,000, carefully spaced transfers, reasonable amounts, groceries, utilities, household buffer. If he noticed, it would look normal. That he didn't notice, that told me something too. For someone who declared ownership so confidently, he wasn't watching the details. That he assumed control without verification. Confidence can make people lazy. Friday night, he came home later than usual, looser tie, slight smell of whiskey. Big meeting? I asked casually. Yeah. Closed something major. Something major that I waited that he didn't elaborate. Congratulations. I said that he smiled. But it didn't reach his eyes. Thanks. Then he added, almost as an afterthought, I might restructure some investments next week. There it was again, restructure, move, shift, all without discussion. That night, after he fell asleep, I checked the business registry site again, new filing, dated that afternoon. An amendment to the holding company. That I stared at the screen. That he wasn't just protecting assets, that he was accelerating something. The next morning, I tested something, over breakfast. I said lightly, I was thinking about maybe consulting again. Part-time. His fork paused mid-air. Why? The word came out sharper than he intended. For myself, I said. I've been out of the field for years. He recovered quickly. We don't need the money. I held his gaze. It's not about needing. A flicker crossed his face, not anger, not exactly, concern, because financial independence isn't threatening when it's hypothetical. It's threatening when it's intentional. Later that afternoon, my daughter came into the kitchen while I was folding laundry. Mom? Yeah, honey. Are you and Dad okay? I kept my hand steady. Why would you ask that? She hesitated, because of what he said at Grandma's. About the money. There it was, the ripple effect. That I sat down beside her. Sometimes adults say things they don't fully think through. Did he mean it? Kids always go straight to the core. That I paused. I don't know yet. That was the most honest answer I could give. On Monday morning, Patricia called again. He transferred $200,000 into a separate investment vehicle last week. I went still, before or after the dinner? 2 days after. My pulse slowed again, that strange calm. That he wasn't reacting emotionally. That he was acting strategically, which meant the dinner comment hadn't been careless. That IT had been revealing. Is he preparing to file? I asked. Hard to say, Patricia replied. But movement at this pace suggests anticipation. Anticipation of what? Exposure? Confrontation, or departure? That evening, I decided to apply pressure, not confrontation. Pressure. At dinner, in front of the kids, I said casually, I met with a financial advisor this week. His head snapped up. You did what? I just wanted a clearer picture of our portfolio. The word "our" hung intentionally in the air. His jaw tightened. Why didn't you tell me? I set my napkin down calmly. Because you didn't tell me about the holding company. The room went still again, not as dramatic as the family gathering, but just as revealing. That he stared at me, calculating. For the first time, he looked unsure. After the kids went upstairs, he followed me into the kitchen. You went through my business filings? Our business filings. I went through public records. His voice lowered. That's an invasion. I almost laughed. Public records are not private. You don't understand how complex this is. There it was, dismissal, minimization, control through intellectual superiority. That I stepped closer. Then explain it. He opened his mouth, then closed it, because explanation would require transparency, and transparency would weaken his position. You're overreacting, he said finally. No, I replied softly. I'm preparing. The word landed harder than I expected. Preparing. His expression shifted, not anger this time, recognition. That he realized I wasn't emotional. That I wasn't flailing. That I was thinking. And that unsettled him far more than tears ever would have. The next morning, something unexpected happened. That he transferred $25,000 into our joint account. Just like that. No explanation. No comment. A gesture. An offering. A test. I stared at the deposit notification on my phone. That he wasn't conceding. That he was recalibrating, trying to restore the illusion of partnership without surrendering control. IT almost would have worked. 10 years ago, that afternoon, Patricia called again. One more thing, she said. There's a draft separation agreement saved in a cloud archive tied to his business email. The words didn't register at first. A what? A draft. Not filed. But dated 3 months ago. 3 months before the dinner, before my discovery, before my so-called overreaction. That I sat down slowly. So this wasn't protection in response to conflict, this was preparation in advance of it. When he walked through the door that evening, I saw him clearly, not as my husband of 17 years, not as the father of my children, but as a man quietly building an exit strategy while smiling across the dinner table. And suddenly, the silence at that family gathering made perfect sense. That he thought he had already won. That he thought I would never know. That night, as he slept, I opened my laptop. That I transferred $10,000, then another $5. Into my account. Strategic, measured, legal. and for the first time since that dinner, I felt something shift fully inside me, not fear, not heartbreak, power, because the next move wouldn't belong to him, and when the room went silent again, it wouldn't be because of what he said that it would be because of what I was about to reveal. Chapter 4. The draft that I didn't confront him right away that I printed the draft separation agreement first. 32 pages. Cold. Clinical. Efficient. It outlined asset division, custody proposals, property allocations, spousal support calculations. That he had highlighted sections, made notes. There were handwritten adjustments in the margins. My stomach didn't drop this time. That it hardened, because this wasn't fear anymore. That it was confirmation. 3 months ago, while we were still taking family photos at our daughter's volleyball tournament, while I was planning our anniversary dinner, while I was sitting beside him on the couch watching Netflix, he was drafting his exit, alone. I chose Sunday night, after dinner, after the dishes were done, after the kids were upstairs. That he was in the living room, scrolling through his phone, bourbon in hand. Can we talk? I asked. That he didn't look up immediately. Sure. I placed the stack of papers on the coffee table in front of him. That he looked down, and for the first time since this began, he froze, not confusion, recognition. His jaw tightened. Where did you get this? That's not the right question. Silence stretched between us. You went into my email? He asked. I accessed archived business documents tied to marital assets. His eyes flashed. That's private. It involves our marriage. He stood up abruptly. You had no right. I stayed seated. I had every right. The air felt electric, not loud, not explosive, just charged with the truth neither of us could avoid anymore. It's a draft, he snapped. It doesn't mean anything. I tilted my head slightly. Then why were you adjusting spousal support calculations? He didn't answer, because there was no good answer. Were you going to tell me? I asked quietly. He ran a hand through his hair. I was trying to protect myself. From what? From being blindsided, he continued. The irony almost made me laugh. You mean like I was? That's not fair. No, I said calmly. It's not. He began pacing. This is exactly why I didn't want you digging into finances. You don't understand how exposed I am. If something happens, what something? He stopped, said nothing, because the something was this, accountability. Then he shifted tactics. You've changed. There it was, deflection. You're distant. Suspicious. You started this. I stood slowly. No. You started this the moment you decided to plan an exit without a conversation. His voice dropped lower. You're overreacting to paperwork. Paperwork that divides custody. That hit him. That he hadn't expected me to say it out loud. You were planning to split holidays, I continued. You assigned yourself primary decision-making for financial education. He looked defensive now. That's standard. Without discussion. He exhaled sharply. You would have gotten emotional. And there it was, the core belief, that my emotions disqualified me from participation. Do you even want to leave? I asked. The question hung heavy. He didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. I don't know, he said finally, honest, late, but honest. Upstairs, I heard a floorboard creak. One of the kids was awake, listening, absorbing, and suddenly this wasn't just about strategy. It was about example. I'm not afraid of divorce, I said evenly. He looked surprised. I'm afraid of deception. He stared at me like he was seeing someone new, because he was the version of me that would have cried, begged, negotiated softly. She was gone. You've been moving assets for months, I continued. Creating layers. Structuring protection. That's smart planning. For a marriage you weren't planning to protect. He didn't respond, because there was no spin left. Did you ever intend to tell me? I asked again. He looked tired now. I thought if I secured everything first, we could talk calmly. Secured everything, for himself, and where would that leave me? I asked. You'd be taken care of. Taken care of, like an obligation, like a dependent, like a line item, not a partner. I walked to the window, looked out into the dark backyard. 17 years. 2 children, shared grief, shared joy, reduced to risk management. You underestimated me, I said quietly. He didn't argue, because he had. What do you want? He asked finally. It was the first real question he'd asked since this began. I turned back to him. I want transparency. That's vague. No, I said. It's simple. Full disclosure of every account. Every asset. Every transfer, immediate restructuring of titles to reflect marital ownership, joint access to all financial platforms, and counseling, real counseling, not performative. He stared at me, processing, calculating cost, weighing pride against exposure, and if I don't agree, he asked that I met his eyes, then I file first. The words landed between us like a dropped weight that he hadn't expected, that he thought he was the one holding the exit door, that he hadn't considered I might reach it first. The room went quiet again, but this silence was different from the family gathering. That one had been shock, this one was shift, power recalibrating. Upstairs, a door clicked softly, our daughter stepped into view at the top of the stairs. She didn't say anything, she just looked at us, and I realized something in that moment. Whatever happened next would define how she understood partnership for the rest of her life. Would she learn that love includes secrecy and strategic advantage, or that self-respect includes boundaries? I'm not your enemy, he said finally, and no, I replied. But you were preparing for war. That silenced him completely. I need time, he muttered. You've had 3 months, I answered. Then I picked up the draft agreement, held it for a second, and placed it back on the table. This doesn't scare me anymore. That was true, because fear lives in uncertainty, and now I knew exactly what I was dealing with. That night, he slept in the guest room, not because I told him to, but because something had shifted beyond proximity. That I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. This wasn't about winning. That it wasn't about revenge. That it was about equity, and dignity, and making sure that if this marriage ended, it would not end with me blindsided, financially cornered, or quietly erased. The next morning, he sent me a calendar. Invite, subject line, financial review, together. It was a start, but it wasn't trust. Trust would take more than a meeting. That it would take exposure, full exposure, and I was prepared to demand it, because the next time a room went silent, it wouldn't be because he declared ownership. That it would be because I demonstrated awareness and control. Chapter 5. The silence meant something different. The meeting was set for Tuesday at 9 a.m. He chose the dining room table, interesting choice, the same table where we had celebrated birthdays. Signed school permission slips. Helped with math homework. Now it held spreadsheets, printed bank statements. That a laptop positioned between us like neutral territory. That he looked composed, prepared. That so was I. But the difference was this: he thought this meeting was about control. For me, it was about clarity. I pulled everything. He began: investment accounts, business holdings, real estate, retirement funds, full disclosure. To his credit, it was thorough. Numbers filled the pages. Assets I knew, assets I didn't. Totals that would have overwhelmed me a month ago. Now they didn't, because this wasn't about the amount. That it was about intention. I never planned to leave without making sure you were taken care of, he said. There it was again, taken care of, like I was a responsibility, not an equal. Why didn't you talk to me? I asked calmly. He exhaled. Because I didn't know how. That was the most human answer he'd given yet. Fear, pride, ego, all tangled together. I felt like if I lost control of the finances, I lost leverage. Leverage, the word hung in the air. Marriage as negotiation, not partnership. You already lost something, I said quietly. What? My trust. He absorbed that, and for the first time since this began, he didn't argue. We spent 3 hours going through every line. Account access was granted, passwords updated, titles reviewed. The duplex would be retitled jointly, the commercial office disclosed formally as marital property, the holding company restructured to reflect shared ownership. Legally binding. Documented. Transparent. It wasn't romantic, but it was real. Around noon, he closed the laptop. So what now? He asked. That question held more weight than any spreadsheet. I looked at him, really looked. The man I married, the father of my children, the man who had let fear turn into secrecy. I'm willing to try counseling, I said. Relief flickered across his face. But, I continued, not because I'm afraid of leaving. That changed the expression instantly. I'm choosing to stay, I said, and that's different. He leaned back slowly, processing, because choice shifts power. Staying from fear is dependency, staying from strength is autonomy. He was no longer the one deciding my security. I was. A week later, we sat in a therapist's office, neutral space, soft lighting. No oak table. No bourbon. No performance. When the therapist asked what brought us in, he started to answer, then stopped, and looked at me. That small gesture meant more than the financial disclosures, because it signaled something. Subtle recognition. But here's the part no one expects. The real turning point didn't happen in therapy. It happened at another family gathering. 3 months later, same house, same table, different atmosphere. His father asked about the rental property again. So how's the duplex doing? I answered, we refinanced and expanded the renovation budget. We did. My husband nodded. Yes, he said. She led the contractor negotiations. No hesitation. No correction. His mother looked surprised, his father blinked, the air shifted, then his father made an offhand comment. Well, at least you're handling it responsibly. It's a lot of money. My husband didn't laugh this time. That he didn't lean back. That he didn't claim ownership. That he said something else. It's ours. Simple. Direct. No theatrics. But the room went silent again, not heavy, not shocked, just still, because everyone remembered the last time, and everyone understood the difference. Later that night, as we drove home, he said quietly, I was wrong. I looked at him, not triumphantly, just steadily. I know. And I'm sorry. The apology wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was quiet and sincere, and that mattered. Here's the truth no one talks about. Financial betrayal doesn't always start with greed. Sometimes it starts with fear, fear of vulnerability, fear of dependence, fear of losing identity. But secrecy transforms fear into damage, and damage, left unaddressed, becomes fracture. We stood at that fracture. And we chose to repair it, together, but not blindly, not without safeguards, not without equality written into documents instead of promises. I still have my own account. That he knows it. That I consult part-time now. That he respects it, not because he suddenly transformed into someone else, but because I transformed first. That I stopped accepting quiet diminishment. That I stopped confusing comfort with security. That I stopped assuming silence meant peace. That sentence at the family gathering, it's my money. It cracked something open, not just in our marriage. I and me, because the real shift wasn't legal. That it wasn't financial. That it was internal. That I realized I would be okay either way, with him. Or without him. And once you know that, you're no longer negotiating from fear. Last month, our daughter asked me something unexpected. Mom, how do you know if a marriage is equal? I thought about it carefully, then I said, when both people could leave, but choose not to. She nodded slowly, like she understood, and maybe she did, because the greatest lesson I could give her wasn't about money. That it was about voice, about boundaries, about preparation, about never allowing someone to define your value by what they deposit. The silence at that first dinner felt like humiliation. The silence at the last gathering felt like balance. Same room, same people, different energy. Because this time, no one doubted my position at that table, including me. He once thought control came from accounts and asset structures. Now he understands something else. Control without trust is isolation, partnership without transparency is illusion, and power shared is not power lost. If you had asked me that night at the family gathering what would happen next, I would have told you I was afraid. Today, I'm not, because whether this marriage continues for another 20 years or not, I know where I stand. Not behind him, not beneath him, beside him. By choice, and that makes all the difference.